Now that you know the basic tools of how to edit your models, I'm going to show you everything else you need to know during the modeling process. First, if we press Z by itself, we see solid, wireframe, material preview, and rendered. These are different shading modes. We are currently in solid and it is the default mode to be in. If we go to wireframe, you'll be in wireframe mode a lot when you're modeling. It allows you to see through your mesh and see all your edges, especially when you're trying to use a reference image. You can follow the reference image without your mesh getting in the way of it, just showing you the edges. If we go into material preview mode, you can see that it previews the material we have. You can see the material settings at the bottom right here. This is all for making textures within Blender. If you plan to use something like Substance Painter, you don't have to worry about what's here directly. If you press Z again and we go into rendered view, this is the view that is used for rendering out images and videos. That is what our light here is doing. If we delete the light, you can see that there's no more light hitting our object in the rendered view. If we go back into solid mode, we can go on to the next hotkeys. If you press the comma key, it'll show you by what axis your movement will naturally occur on. Right now we are on global, which means these lines will always be used for your movement direction. But let's say I rotate my mesh. Now, if I try to move it locally this way, I can't do that. But if I hold comma and I go to local, then I can actually move it along that axis and it will constantly update and move in the direction of its local axes. You also have view, which just moves it according to the way you're looking at it. Z be going directly to you. This is not very commonly used, but it can be useful for select situations. Right click to cancel. We also will have normal. Now the issue with local is when your mesh gets more complicated and you want to move this face directly this way, you can't do it anymore, which is where you use normal. Now you can move the face in the direction it's facing. Next, if you press the period key, this is your pivot points. Whereas with the comma key, it is your orientation. So if you set our orientation back to global and we set our pivot point to our active element, it will rotate around what we have last selected. If we set it to the 3D cursor, last video I said that I would explain more about the 3D cursor later on. Now, the 3D cursor, you can either completely ignore or you can use it a ton. Let's say you can't get the exact dimension that you want to rotate something around. You could go into orthographic perspective, zoom in, and shift right click. This will bring the 3D cursor to where you click. And now you can rotate entire topology around your 3D cursor. If you want to reset your 3D cursor, just press Shift C. Now we can look at individual origins. This is extremely useful for a case I'll give an example for. If you were trying to inset multiple faces next to each other, you have to press I twice. But when you want to scale them, you can't really scale them individually, but with a pivot point of individual origins, you can now scale each one individually. And to confirm, you press I twice. That's just an example of how individual origins can be used. Now, bounding box center is the default, and you will use it most of the time. Now that I'm done with this mesh, I can press X to delete it. And remember, if I want to add it back, I use Shift A, go to whatever I want here, but mesh and then cube. Now I have my cube back. I can press period on my numpad to go into it. I can press tab to go into edit mode, press 1 to go into vertices select mode, and then I can start moving my vertices around, and then right click to cancel, left click to confirm. Now, if I press N, it will show me transformation data. If I leave edit mode, I can drag these sliders to change the position. And if I move it, it will tell me what position the cube is in. Same for rotation, scale, and dimensions, which is just scale, but locally. Tool is just settings for the tool you have selected, which I never use. And then we have view. We can change our focal length, the default being 50, and we can edit the position of the 3D cursor in here as well. Now, to move the 3D cursor back to the center, I'll do Shift C. I'll select the camera and the cube, press X, delete them. Now we're going to install a plugin called Loop Tools. This is built in with Blender. You just have to turn it on. So go to Edit, Preferences, Get Extensions, search Loop Tools. It will say install, but I already have it installed. Go to Add-ons, search for Loop Tools, turn that on, and just close that tab. If we add a cube back, if we open a new file to refresh and press N to open that side menu, go to edit mode, we now have all these loop tools. It will go over that in the next video, as well as the modifiers tab, and begin to talk about some of the things in these drop downs up here. Practice all these tools, try and internalize the shortcuts, research shortcuts, look up shortcut, learn about them, and practice them.